Obama disaster Iran. Perhaps of all the issues confronting America, the most serious is the approaching Iran nuclear weapons acquisition. Now, the problem with Obama is, although he says that he will not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon, it's all rhetoric for him, and he's not going to do anything to stop them. The first couple of years of his administration, he thought naively or traitorously that we could just talk them out of it. And he tried, but obviously it didn't work. You can't talk Hitler out of being Hitler, and you can't talk the mullahs out of being the mullahs. And then he tried sanctions, although the problem was that despite Congress wanting very tough sanctions, Obama's administration did everything it could to block tough sanctions. Why? That's another question. We don't know why, but he did. And now that Israel has decided that it probably needs to take matters in its own hand, Obama's done everything he can to block Israel from telling them that he'll give them weapons they need to do it, but only if they promise not to do it until 2013, and starting to blame Israel for rising gas prices. The guy is just not going to stop Iran. Now, what is the danger with Iran? Well, first you have people who say, it's just rhetoric when they say they want to destroy Israel. You don't have to believe them. But give me an example in American history or world history where somebody said they wanted to kill Jews and they didn't actually try. Was Hitler bluffing? What makes you think Iran's bluffing? Second of all, the mere possession of nuclear weapons for Iran is a problem, because if you think they're causing problems now, if they had a nuclear weapon, can you imagine how much trouble they'd cause? Third, the other countries run by despots in the Middle East have made it clear that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, then they're going to want nuclear weapons. And fourth, they don't need nuclear weapons to blow up America. They can send dirty bombs in trucks across the borders and blow up 50 cities using Hezbollah suicide bombers. You don't think they'd want to do that? Of course they would, and they can have deniability. And you actually think, now people say, well, they're not crazy. Well, yes, they are. Are there people in Iran in leadership who would be willing to sacrifice 30 million Iranians in order to destroy Israel? They could destroy Israel with one nuclear bomb. Now, even the most sophisticated anti-missile systems in Israel haven't been able to deflect 100%. If they sent 30 bombs, you don't think one would get through? And it would just take one to destroy Tel Aviv and in all of Israel. And you don't think they'd do that? Of course they would. What makes you think they're bluffing? And can you really take that chance? So Obama's greatest foreign policy failure by far, and there are many. Now why? Well, that's an interesting story. It seems like the guy is supporting Shia Islam against Sunni Islam. I'll give you an example. He forced out Mubarak, America's best Arab ally, from Egypt, and they have been replaced by Muslim Brotherhood and leadership, which is a terrorist organization, which is a Sunni country, and yet he won't do anything about Syria and Assad, who's butchering his own citizens. Why? Because that's a Shiite country associated with Iran, and they're Iran's proxies, and he's not doing anything about stopping Iran, even though he's blustering. And so it has something to do with his preference for Shia against Sunni Islam. Now, why is that? Well, it's a complicated story. It probably has to do with his hatred of the House of Saud and about Churchill. But in any case, it's clear that he's not doing anything to stop Iran. He's been blocking sanctions. He wasted 2 years trying to dialogue. He's threatening Israel against them using military weapons. And so this is the biggest foreign policy failure, catastrophic in its implications, and a disaster for the United States and the world.